I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. The show is happening. The show is happening, Zosia. You are on Hard Knocks, and I need to just update you on this, common ground we weirdly find ourselves in, where Andre is both of our love interests in different shows. So that's...
Love it. He is like the love interest that I would wish on everyone professionally. Like he's just the best. He's just the best.
And I think what's so fun is okay, this is totally random, and I swear we're going, I really want to talk to you about Does This Make Me Funny, because we're gonna get there.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. But I just have to do this, relate on this moment of in both cases he plays very different characters. So okay, Laid on one, and so which is out there, people can see Laid. We are both in Laid. We have a beautiful quasi romantic moment in Laid at a beautiful Italian restaurant.
Also, I think I am hoping you're my love interest, but it's maybe not reciprocated.
Yeah, I think
it's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful, loving scene.
Yeah, it's a loving scene. There's passion.
Yes, again, it's only one way, but it does exist.
I mean, at the end, I feel yes, this girl is going out there and getting hers, and it's also not me, which is good. But he's your love interest, and he's a quirky video game playing guy. In this one, in The Tempered, which is this show this sci-fi show, that's set in, it's very low budget dystopian sci-fi story.
Amazing.
He plays this character who kind of sort of works for the government, collecting materials from basically the governments have all shut down, but in this dystopian world where there's quasi government and it's all corrupt, they're collecting things from people so that they can get credits and they can sort of survive this dystopian environment. He works for them and he visits me in order to collect my dues, but he also has a thing for me, and we have this sort of love-hate situation going on. He's sort of taking care of me even though I'm pushing back against him. It's great. It's great. We have some moments.
Where can I see this?
We're figuring that out at this moment, great. But I will keep you updated. So in the meantime, while I'm just, taking my first little steps into doing on-screen acting, you have been out there forever, awesomely. I first saw you on Girls, and and then of course we worked together on Laid. But you've been in movies. You were on the Decameron, which I thought was so fun and hilarious, and I think you've talked about all of those things endlessly. And so I really want to talk to you about Does This Make Me Funny? So what is Does This Make Me Funny?
Does This Make Me Funny is my book that is coming out September 9th. It is a compilation of, it's basically my diary. That's what I keep telling people. So I'm I basically am essentially publishing my diary.
Awesome.
Which was not intentional. I did this book years ago now called My First Popsicle. That's a compilation of essays by a bunch of other brilliant writers. I wrote one of them, and then I edited the rest. And cool. I just convinced this amazing slew of humans to write essays for this book. Somehow, I don't know how. And I loved editing other people's writing. I loved it so much. I loved helping other people form a story.
It's so much more fun than having to form the story yourself.
So much more fun and so rewarding, and it's not scary at all. You're just I'm just here. I'm just here. I'm going to hold your hand.
I'm here to help,
you know, sounding board. You tell me what you need. You want some tough love? I got it. You want me to be gentle? No problem. But when I was selling that book, the woman who would become my editor was like, well, we're really interested in a book of personal essays. Would you consider a 2-book deal and doing that second? And at the time I was like, yeah, for sure. Thinking that by the time we got there, everyone would forget. And then we did Popsicle and I loved it so much. And I was like, great, can we do another one of those? And my editor, Meg, was like, well, maybe, but you have to write the other book that you're contractually obligated
Obligate.
to write first, that's like just essays about your life. And I was like, oh, fuck. Okay. Shit. And then I wrote it in sort of like a fugue state. And then when I came to, and they were like, okay, now this is like the layout and you can't change it any longer. I was like, oh, that's my diary. Yeah. Yeah, that's what the book is.
Love it. Love it. I find this, I think, okay, so I have found just, first of all, in reading it, but also just in doing a little bit of more research about just you as a person and you and your career, I was shocked to discover a lot of like really surprising parallels that I want to sort of pitch your way, like pitch back at you and get your thoughts on this. First of all, one of the things that I really resonated with, just having myself just published a memoir very recently, was you writing about one of the
Your book
purposes.
is right there.
Oh my God, it's right there. Awesome. Amazing.
That was not on purpose, by the way. That's just where it lives.
Amazing. I have only the PDF version of yours so far, so just imagine that it's digitally next to me.
Yeah, sure.
But one of the things that I like that when you've talked about, like, okay, this is my diary, this is like my personal stuff. I also feel like I am one of those now at this point in my life oversharing people. I've shared, like, I talk about masturbating in prison in my recent book, and a lot of people are like, why would you share that? And you know what I respond is, well, you may not be masturbating in prison, but you're certainly masturbating. And you're also a person who is like a sexual being in the world. And that's just one of the many things that I talk about in this memoir. And like, I'm both writing this memoir because I want to feel seen, but also because I want you to feel seen, right? Like I'm doing this thing where I've discovered this, is that the more that you share of yourself, the more you find people reflect and mirroring that back at you, and that feeling of connection, it comes back at you. And I wonder if, like, for me at least, a little bit of my oversharing is in part because I have felt so ostracized and so estranged from humanity. And so this is like me sort of just now like an addict, like a sugar, like a kid who never got to have sugar, and now all of a sudden ate their first slice of cake. Like, I'm just like, give me the human connection. I wonder, like, do you feel like yours is coming from a similar place, or like where is that instinct to share such deeply personal stuff coming from, do you think?
Yeah, I think like I love all of that, and I agree with all of it. And I think I say this a lot. My husband, I steal this from him. He always says that like the point of being an artist, or for him, the point of being an artist is to help people feel less alone. Whether that is, to your point, like expressing something through art that makes someone feel seen or recognized in a way that they haven't before, or if it's creating something like your amazing sci-fi show and like giving them a totally separate reality to escape within. Either way, you're making people feel less alone. And I think that's kind of at the core of it, and probably goes very hand in hand with what you're talking about, that as someone who was very alone for most of my life, as were you, like there is that compulsion to try to form like real, true human connection. And I think sometimes that manifests as being like, I'll show you all of me, in the hopes, which I don't even think is conscious, but probably subconsciously, we're like, I'll show you all of me in the hopes that you will respond in kind. We can share something or connect on some level.
Totally. So what are those like, so, this is a book of personal essays about, in a way, growing up in show business, right? And that's not something that a lot of people have the experience of, in the same way that like growing up in a prison cell is not the experience that a lot of people have. What are some of like, but the thing that I was always talking about when I'm like describing what my memoir was about was you don't have to have gone through the exact same thing that I went through to have experienced like the emotional truth of what I'm talking about. And I'm wondering, like, what do you think are some of the universal truths and the emotional truths that have like universal resonance that you circle around in Does This Make Me Funny?
I mean, I think so much of it is about not feeling like enough, or just feeling like the person that I am, the person that I want to be, is maybe not correct or doesn't fit with what people expect of me, want of me. That the mold or the system that I'm entering into doesn't offer up an obvious spot for me to slot into. And so feeling this serious resistance. And, I think as a young person, and our instinct, instead of saying to ourselves, well, maybe there's something wrong with the system, or the system needs to evolve or change, we say, oh, there's something wrong with me. And I think that is incredibly universal in terms of coming of age. I think whether or not you're trying to be an actor or an artist, I think being a teenager is fucking hard. Especially, I mean, I say this all the time. Like, I don't think I would have made it if social media existed when I was a teen. I think that would have been too overwhelming for me. Um,
Yeah, it's something I definitely think about as a mom. Like this is a down the road issue, but maybe not as far down the road as I'd like. And like, what am I gonna do? Yeah,
like that stuff is crazy. Just, I think the pressure that adds onto an already pressurized thing of growing up and figuring out who you are. So I think it's a lot about personal identity at its core. It's a lot about body image, which I think is very sadly universal, especially for women in our society. Um, it's a lot about fucked up relationships, and the things that we will endure because we think maybe we're not good enough and we don't deserve the things that we want. um, and I don't think any of these things, if you removed the element of show business, I feel like most people growing up in an American society, especially women growing up in an American society, would probably say that they've experienced something along that spectrum.
totally. Absolutely. One of the things that I was really okay, again, maybe this was because I was in a hole for it during, like the late 2000s, early 2010s, when you were like becoming like a very well-known person in your own right for your career reasons. Like I missed the whole like thing about people attacking you for being a nepo baby, and like the constant sort of just like what is this show Girls, and who are these girls who are playing these girls, and what the hell, and it's like such a and I missed that, and yet but like so when I encountered you writing about this like real tension that you have between gratitude and defensiveness and trying to like responding to the fact that you're both you are both under the wing and in the shadow of people, your family's legacy, and how certain people want to put labels on you as a response to that, particularly because of the business industry and how hierarchical it is. Like I was both surprised by that, and I feel really bad about that because I mean, that fucking sucks. But also the thing that I wanted to say, this long preamble, is that I also really relate to that in us, I think maybe a surprising way, because in my own way, I have also been sort of like platformed and some people would argue like, why this girl, why is she being, platformed as like, why this wrongly convicted woman and not that wrongly convicted woman, why, and like, I think there's a lot of I do face in my own life people who try to find fault in any kind of success that I may strive for, and any kind of visibility or agency that I might try to, achieve. And like underscoring that messaging is this like affirmation, whether it is, actually explicitly said or implicit in it, is this idea that I'm not worthy, that I don't deserve to be where I am and don't deserve to do what I'm doing. And I'm wondering, like, so one, I want to say that I relate to you in that regard, and I wanted to know, like, how has how are you holding that? Because I also am I also feel in myself that tension between gratitude and defensiveness. And like I do find myself saying to people, like, people who explicitly tell me, why are you on this stage telling the story and not someone else? And it's like, well, I was in prison for 4 fucking years for something I didn't do. Like, what the hell? Like, why, so I'm just curious. Like,
it's so crazy. I mean, this is not like, as a woman, I think sometimes there's this feeling, I don't know if you have this, where you're like, what can you tell me, like, what the criteria are? Like, what are the criteria that I need to meet for you to be like, okay, like what are they? Because tell me, and like I'll try and do it. But like I feel like I'm like, that should be enough. Like for you, like you should just be like, that's enough. Like that's enough. But for some reason they're like, actually, I want a little bit more. It's like, okay, what? Like what else
or
do
I
you
want
want?
you to be a little bit different than in some way that you have no control over. It's like, what do you want from me? Like,
I think honestly, sometimes it's that they don't actually know. I think it's that for some reason it's an ever moving target. My friend says this thing. She's like, I think the reason that a lot of the reason that like the witch trials existed and that there was this movement against essentially like powerful, intuitive women was that it was just too scary for so many of these men who didn't understand this like quote unquote power. Like if you take away the witchiness of it all, oftentimes you look at these women who are documented as being tried in the witch trials and like they were just like women who knew their shit and who had a strong intuition. And I think sometimes if we are, to your point, different than what people are used to, or we don't fit into a box, and we've overcome something hard, that's scary to people. That's like something that they can't easily understand. And I think instead of a curiosity and a desire to understand that, they would rather just reject it because they're like, that, I don't know, that's weird. That feels weird. And it makes them uncomfortable.
hmm. So is that how you're holding that right now, is like trying to understand, like, on the other side, where is that criticism even coming from? Like, why are people like trying to hold me to an impossible standard? It doesn't make any sense. Like, why are people like trying to find fault in me? Yeah, is that like the strategy?
I don't know. I honestly don't even know if I figured it out. I think so much of it has been at times, which I guess is sort of a version of what you're describing, trying to not give up, but like come to terms with the fact that sometimes it is an unrealistic standard and that like for whatever reason I don't meet it, and not that I need to know in myself where that boundary is to be like, okay, I'm not going to try to pretzel myself beyond this point to be something that I don't even know what that is. Like I will go to certain lengths and then I just have to sort of accept that whatever they want, I'm not it. And that I think it's just been like a long journey for me to learn that for the most part, it's not personal.
Hmm. Totally.
Which is so, I mean, that's so counterintuitive. It's so hard to do. I'm sure you experience this, but like I think 99% of the time, it's not actually about you. It's about whatever they're dealing with and how you trigger that in them.
Whenever anyone comes up to me or like approaches me or reaches out to me and asks like, what do I do with the fact that I'm feeling attacked and I'm feeling not enough or I'm feeling too much for other people, what do I do? One of my biggest pieces of advice is, well, insofar as they're like, I know that that's impacting you, like the way people have expectations about you impacts what you're capable, like what you're capable of doing, because we're all interconnected. We all depend on each other. You're not just a human island, like, sure. But like the last thing that you need is to take it personally, because it really isn't about you. Like, and I think that was like one of those weird lessons that I learned from my own experience because of just like the insane accusations that were coming my way. Like the person that was being hated by so many people and like torn down by so many people didn't actually exist. And so there was no like confusion on my part. And I feel like maybe like I'm intrigued how you came to that conclusion, because I always feel really sad. Like I feel like I'm having to convince people of that when they're in a more difficult situation, interestingly, because a lot of times the things that people find fault in you are sometimes like technically true. Like in your case, you are related to a bunch of, people who are, famous in show business. Okay, fine. You're finding fault in me for that. But is that my fault, or is that you having like that's where you have to untangle that. And how did you figure out how to do that?
I mean, I think I'm still doing it. Like I don't think it's something that I'm like good at always. I think, there's a spectrum, and obviously um I think whenever I'm not like on my A game, it affects me more, like when we're feeling sensitive, and it's not always like I'm not like a Buddhist master, I can't always let it roll off my back, but I think I think a lot of it was just practice and like getting older and moving through the same scenario over and over again. And to your point, it's sort of like it almost becomes a little bit like a math equation where you're like, okay, what are the variables and like what's the common denominator here? Because the more you get to know yourself as you get older, and like if you go through something trying, I think it forces so much more introspection than most people do in their lives. So you keep looking in, and I think the deeper in you get, it's like the truthful voices get a little louder. So those evil voices that are like, maybe they're right, or like, you are a Nepo hack, or, you know, if everyone's saying it, then it must be true.
Right.
I think you just get better at questioning those voices.
Hmm.
Or it's the practice of questioning those voices and being like, well, but is that true? Or do I feel that way? Or like, well, what was the scenario in which that person said or did those things? And like, what's that circumstance? I think if you can look at it all, if you can like pull out and get a little bit of a 60,000-foot view, sometimes you can really see like, oh, wow, that's what they're going through. And of course that influences how they feel about me. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it sounds sort of reductive, but I think so much of it is just perspective.
Mm, yeah. One of the things that I know that helps you and also helps me is having a sense of humor about it as well, like trying to find levity in it. And I think one of your like big charms is how like really both like whimsical and charming you are and also self-deprecating, which and self-deprecating requires both self-awareness and like a willingness to be a little like to be a little self-punishing. And how do you walk that fine line between like, you know, giving yourself the credit that you deserve and being self-aware of that, and also, punishing yourself a little for everyone else's entertainment? Like how do you do that?
I mean, it's a great question. It's very hard. I think what that's born out of, which is probably not that healthy, is a little bit of like, you're probably going to get there, so I'm going to get there first. Like I'm going to do it to myself so you can't do it to me. Um so I think like a lot of the in writing a lot of the book, like the epilogue was actually my husband's idea because I was talking to him about all my fears of what people would say or think or do when the book came out. And he was like, well, why don't you just like beat them to it? Like just put it all in there, and then it's out there. Like you've addressed everything already. And I think I didn't even realize that I'd sort of done a lot of that in the writing. I was like, I'm going to go all the way to the extreme because you're probably going to go there. So, like, at least I've said it already. Um, so I think that's sort of where it comes from. And then I think the way I've pulled it back so it's not like quite full-fledged self-flagellation is it's just like doing the work to your point of like learning how to be proud of myself and like quiet the imposter syndrome and um, try to give myself credit when it's due, which I'm again like not great at all the time, but it's like I think the harder I work at that, the percentage of like self abuse dims slightly. Like the scales start to balance a little bit more.
I'm hearing another thing that you write a lot about in this, which, you write about anxiety, you write about eating disorders, you write about OCD. Uh, you write a lot about needing to control your environment and needing to control your circumstances in order to feel safe, right? To feel safe to put this book out, feel safe to do all the things that you do. And I'm wondering, like, how your relationship with control has evolved.
Whoa, that's such a good question.
That should be like the byline of my podcast, by the way, because like every time I talk to someone, they're always like, "That's a good question."
Such a good question. Oh my God. That's such a good question. I mean, like, I'm sure you understand that to the umpteenth degree in terms of like trying to, whether it's real or not, like find the ways that you can tell your brain that you're in control to make you feel safe. Um, I think the thing that has shifted the most in me in reference to that was actually I sort of had to like circumvent it a little bit because I feel like if you tell a brain that is prone to all of those things, anxiety, OCD, depression, to stop, like that. It's just not, it's like saying, don't think of an elephant, like it's not, that's not how the brain works. Um, and I did that for a really long time and it didn't work. I did it with no success. But I think the thing that I started to do that surprisingly helped me to let go of the reins a little bit was working on trusting myself and my intuition. Because I think if you replace the need for control with trust, it offers the same feeling of safety. I think it's much harder and much scarier to do, specifically when we're prone to looking for control in tangible ways, which, like, who isn't? Um, but I think when you start to listen to your own intuition, that in and of itself can make you feel safe. And it's a more secure safety. It's more holistic, I think. I feel like the need for control and the getting of it is almost like a fix, but it doesn't last that long. And it makes you so tired because it's like you're white knuckling things. Um, and I think trust is like it's a much more like subconscious, passive action. And it starts to just distill that feeling of safety, like as like a low hum as opposed to, like an up and down. So I think that has been the biggest antidote for me.
Yeah, I love that. Um, yeah, I think a lot about my own like just hearing you, I'm thinking a lot about my own relationship with trust and trust in myself, and how there was definitely periods of my life where I did not feel like I could trust myself, because not because I was afraid that I was going to do something, but that I was afraid that I was not going to be able to protect myself from somebody else doing something to me, because here I am just being a person, and then all of a sudden people just keep hitting me with trains, and I'm like, where is my train radar? Like, what, like, I'm just trying to be nice and trying to be a good person, and just keep getting like fucking hit in the head with a bat, because like I can't, like, do I have blinders on? Do I not see? And I think that one of the things that I discovered from experiencing trauma was, and I wrote about this recently on my Substack, but it was like this discombobulated, when you've had the rug pulled out from underneath you, your ability to discern what is a red flag and what is a green flag. It's almost like you become
Mm,
psychologically colorblind, and
1000%.
right, and then you just and then how do you recalibrate? How do you rediscover your inner compass so that you can trust your intuition, that you can trust your instincts? And, for me, I'm not entirely sure I've figured out that answer, because I all I know is that those instincts are in there. Self-preservation is deeply in there. Experience, which is another word for trial and error, is one of those things. But the other thing I think is like learning how to listen to yourself. And I think that one of the things that really shows a mature person is their ability to actually just be quiet with themselves and be able to listen. And instead of listening to, all of the different inputs that are coming from everywhere else, and also all of the inputs that are you wanting the world to be different than it really is, instead of just like quietly listening to your body, recognizing what the dangers are, what the discomforts are, what the opportunities are. Um, do you feel like similar? Have you like, how have you sort of developed that sense of trust in yourself?
I mean, I think all of that is so poignant and accurate. And I think to your point, it's so much of, how do I say this properly? Like, I think there's a really interesting push pull when you've experienced true trauma where like we didn't choose these things. Like you know, it's not like you were jumping motorcycles over flaming pits and you like fell and got burned your whole body and people were like, well, you know, like yeah, that's not what happened. You weren't putting yourself in harm's way, but harm's way found you. And I think like emotional psychological color blindness is such a good way to put it because I think um sort of like an animal that's been abused, like the fact that we then expect them to suddenly be okay with humans, the animal's like, fuck you. Like, I was fine. And then y'all came along and like did horrible things to me. And now all of a sudden you're like, no, but actually, I know I'm a human too, but like, I'm cool. And like, it's so hard to rebuild that trust in the world, in your circumstances, and the people around you. And so I think that color blindness that you're describing can create a real timidness. And I think that in turn can create the need for control. And then that's the thing that makes you stop listening to yourself because you're like, well, I was listening to myself. I didn't feel this need for control, but then all these horrible things happened. So now I need to be like hyper vigilant. And I think that hypervigilance makes it impossible to do what you're talking about, which is get quiet and listen. And I think it's just like taking those baby steps of like inching your way into the places that scare you and trying to retrain your brain to realize it is safe, that it's okay, that you don't need to consciously always be looking for danger. And I think I'm still doing that too. I think it's really hard to do that.
One thing you talk about in your book is how you had a lot of magical thinking, especially in your youth. And that was a form of self-protection. That was another form of maybe not control, but definitely self-protection. And I'm wondering, you know, even if you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore, what kind of magic do you turn to now in for the sake of self-preservation or self-protection, if at all?
My God. I mean, I don't know. There's probably still part of me, like every Christmas we watch all these holiday movies and I'm like,
Maybe.
please, come on, man. Come on. I mean, oh God, if I ever held a candle for anyone, it's Santa Claus.
I think that's so funny because it's an old man who breaks into your home.
1,000.
Like that's like
I was with my mom who's not Jewish and my dad who is Jewish, who I moved in with later in my life. And whenever my younger siblings would complain and be like, we want Christmas, my stepmom would be like, it's literally a fat guy that comes down the chimney and he stares at you while you're sleeping. You want that? And they'd be like, no, I don't want that.
now that you mention it.
Actually, no, that sounds terrifying. I mean, I think in my adulthood, like the closest thing I have to daily magic is the time I spend with my horse. I think that that's also I think the thing that's like taught me the most, I guess it rewired me the most in terms of trusting my instincts. Because you have to. Like if you don't, you're screwed. And you have to be so present and you have to be so open. And like horses are so insane. They're so intuitive. They're so like, I think they can see and feel things that we don't understand. Um,
Explain that more to me, because I hear you. Like, I did not grow up around horses, but my brother-in-law has horses, and he's a Ren Fair performer. He's the director. Yeah, he's the director of the Seattle Knights. Shout out to the Seattle Knights, who go around in Ren Fairs and they do combat and jousting and all of that with horses. It's fantastic. And every time I go and visit, I'm always, I think, justifiably terrified of horses.
beyond justifiable, for sure.
They're huge and powerful, and they're not the same thing as having a puppy. Like, it's just not the same thing. And so can you talk to me about what is it about horses, and like when you say that they are feeling things that and experiencing things that we are not capable of understanding, like what are you talking about?
I think, sure. I mean, we also don't have to talk. I would like my husband.
I'm curious about this.
Whenever we're like at a dinner party or someone asks about horses, my husband's like, well,
here it goes.
Talk about it forever. I'm like such a little horse nerd. They are, I mean, I think all animals have this ability, right? Like, I think because they operate from such a primal place that we do not, they speak a different language. And I think everything we're talking about, these sort of additions of anxiety and OCD, like so much of that is influenced by external forces that we are internalizing and then like metabolizing into the way we operate in the world. And I think animals don't do that in the same way. I think they are both so much more binary than we are, and also so much more intuitive, because I think they can get really quiet in their own minds. And like a horse can feel a fly next to its body. Like, they are so aware of everything around them. They're so sensitive. They're so intuitive. And I think this world of magic that I searched so much for when I was a child, I watched that movie Escape to Witch Mountain, like on repeat. It's this like cheesy 80s movie. And basically the whole concept is that these two twins who like find each other again, they're born with this purple magic that is sort of reawakened when they're reunited. But the bigger idea behind it is that we're all born with this purple magic. We just forget how to use it. As we get jaded, as we get older, as we get sort of more structured as humans, like cemented in our ways, we just stop remembering how to access it. And I think interfacing with horses so much, it forces you to be so open and to be so receptive to the world around you in the way that they are. That feels to me a little bit like magic.
I mean, what you're describing to me sounds like a mindset that is not distracted. And it's also a little bit reminds me of when I was first reading about, like, when I was first had very young, well, I still have very young children, but like, newborns, and like what it's like. I'm curious what the consciousness of what is it like to be a newborn? And one of the things that I read about was this difference between spotlight consciousness and like lamplight consciousness, I think is what they called it, where we start out with sort of like lamplight consciousness, which is just everything is open. We're taking in everything and everything is equal. And then as our minds become more sophisticated and capable of meta awareness, we start having a spotlight consciousness, which is focusing on individual things instead of taking in everything. And it sounds to me like what you're describing is a level of consciousness that is hyper aware, and yet at the same time is not so aware that they have developed a spotlight consciousness. And I'm wondering if you think like that's the ideal, because like the other flip side of it, like I don't really. Like for me, I also think of all human beings as animals, and we all just have varying different like we all have consciousness. We just have different kinds of consciousness. And another example of a different kind of consciousness that's less than the horse one is like I think of this bug. There's this experiment of this. They were looking at like what seemed to be really intelligent behavior in like insects, right? And there's this one insect that will go and gather a seed and then bring it back to an inch in front of its hole and then go back into its hole to check and see if there's a predator before going back up to get the seed, right? And what the experimenters did though is they were like, okay, is this intelligent behavior or what is this behavior? And so what they did is they had the little insect, they had its hole, they had its seed. And the routine is it brings it within an inch of its hole, goes down, checks if there's a predator, comes back, gets the seed, right? Well, what they did was they just simply scooched whenever the animal, whenever the insect brought the seed an inch in front of its hole, as soon as it went down to check for a predator, they just scooched the seed back a few inches. And then the insect would come back up, not find the seed, go and get it, bring it an inch in front of its hole, and then go back down to check if there's a predator and come back in and come back up, and they just scooch it again, like a couple of inches, which so like this like thing that was considered like you'd think the insect would realize that's the same seed and this is the same hole that I've already checked a million times. But they were able to show that this like insect had this sort of ingrained instinct to do this behavior, and it wasn't thinking about it. It was just doing it. And so where at like what level of consciousness, at what level of awareness is the kind of like ideal awareness of being? And it seems like what you're saying is it's horse awareness, which is very lamplight awareness.
But interestingly enough, I listened to this, I love this podcast, You're Wrong About. Have you ever listened?
Yeah, I've been on it.
Oh my God. What episode? I have to listen to your episode.
It's an episode about justice. It was like a few years ago. Amazing. So you'll have to go back.
I just started listening to it like a couple months ago. So I'm just like working my way through it. Have you listened to the one about coyotes? I thought coyotes were cool before. I thought they were a little like meth heady, but I was like, you guys are cool. Now I'm like,
why meth heady?
Like they're all like jacked out and they're always like weird and kind of like stalking in the shadows.
Scraggly. Yeah.
I don't know. They always just seem a little tweaked out.
Okay. All right.
But
noted.
Like coyotes, respect. This episode was so insane. And honestly, I was like, I feel like coyote is kind of it. And maybe it's because they're so adaptable. Like they're still animalistic and very primal, but there's something, and I don't think horses quite have these capabilities, but I think maybe that's what we're sort of saying. It's like lamplight, but yeah, not like overly conscious to the point of anxiety. But basically, coyotes just seem fascinating. I mean, I think the coolest thing I learned about them was when we came over and we settled in the US, we were like, coyotes are the devil, because we brought all this livestock with us and they were like, great, snacks. And we were like, coyotes must die.
No.
They found out that there was like this huge movement to try and poison the coyote population to kill them off. And they've since discovered that coyotes have a genetic mutation where when they sense their population dwindling, they can have larger litters more often. And I was like,
And that's nature going, fuck you guys.
that's crazy. We were trying to kill them off, and they were just like, great, we're actually just going to get way bigger.
Yeah, we're just going to fuck a lot more.
We're
And you're
going to have huge litters, and you're going to be extra screwed. But then they also seem to have these capabilities. They're so adaptable. So, like, if their hunting strategies get interrupted in some way, they can just entirely switch them up. Like, if they're eating meat and there's no more meat, they will just switch to being fully plant-based. And they also do this thing that they don't really seem to find in other predatory animals. They will get another animal to help them that has abilities that they don't have, and then share the spoils with them. So they were like finding all of these instances where coyotes were they were basically like hiring badgers or gophers to help them hunt. So they would chase their prey to a hole, and then the gopher would go down and bring it out, and then they would share it. And it was like, coyotes are so cool.
Okay, so but does that like knowing that, like knowing does that change your perspective, or like does that in any way influence how you think about your own brain and your own, OCD and anxiety? Like is that a symptom of some sort of like higher functioning, or is it a syndrome that is like imposed upon you from elsewhere? Like I also just wonder, like, are all of these things that our brains do that could potentially be, impacting us negatively? Is is there a potential to see them as like adaptations?
That's really interesting. I I often think about them as mechanisms that were once useful and are no longer necessary. And so they absolutely served a purpose at a certain point and were necessary when they served that purpose. And now the purpose that they were being utilized for has been removed. And so they're trying to, like, my buddy describes anxiety as a flea looking for its host body. Or I'll say it's like a ghost looking for like someone to possess. Sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, that's where my anxiety flea landed today," because like the job that it used to have is not the job that it's needed for anymore, and the anxiety is still there, but it doesn't have anything to do.
Hmm. There's no like actual danger of a
Yeah,
lion gonna attack you, right?
yeah. Like, I'm sure things that served you when you were in prison are no longer necessary, but your brain learned that behavior, it learned that pattern, and like trying to teach it that the circumstance has changed and that behavior is no longer needed. I think like that's the part that's really hard. But that's what I try and tell myself sometimes is my therapist will say, ask yourself, am I in danger? And if I'm not in danger, what am I scared of? And sometimes I think if you can name that, you can like reverse engineer back into being like, oh, these emotions that I'm feeling right now, this anxiety, this OCD, this need for control is actually not. I can turn it off. It's not necessary. Which I think is very hard to do.
Do you know, and again, this is me being curious about the human mind. And I do not suffer from OCD. Uh, I do suffer from anxiety, but for good reason. And so like I,
Why?
wonder,
You have anxiety. That's so.
the fear of just losing everything out of the blue for no reason. I don't know why I would have that fear. But I wonder if like do you ever talk with your therapist or anyone who's smart about what sort of instincts that we have that that we haven't tapped into for a long, long time, but that would be really, really useful in the current state of affairs where we're constantly being distracted. And, like I'm wondering about what sort of things can we tap into that are like deep and visceral that would actually help us adapt to the environment that we're in now.
That's a really interesting question. Um,
Like, is there an anti OCD instinct? Is there just like a tuning it out and piecing out instinct? Like what what do you do?
I mean, I think like so much of the way that we exist in the world, the way we interface with our surroundings, the way we interface with each other is so not tactile. It's so fast and it's so ephemeral. And I think so much of that, I loved what you said about a distracted mind. I mean, I think like I'm guilty of it. Like I will be listening to a voicemail while writing an email, while looking like at like, setting the oven timer. Like I'm constantly so fragmented. Um and not I think, we've come to refer to that as multitasking, and it's such a useful skill, and I don't know if it's the best for mental health. And I think slowing down and like what you said earlier about getting quiet and like just learning to really listen um, is so important. And I feel like maybe that's, so, we used to do that, right?
We used to have no choice but to do that.
Like it's so crazy. Like you think about just the way people used to communicate. Like it took so much more time. It took so much more work. It was not immediate in any way, shape, or form. And I think
You can't hunt and gather while, folding a basket or, like
you got to
doing
do
all
one
the
of those
things.
things at a time.
You got to one at a
Like you
time.
can't do them all at once. And I think, yeah, I think about that. I think about that a lot. I also think we outsource so much of our own decision making nowadays. I think, like, especially, and again, like, I am so guilty of this, like, with the advent of AI. Like, we just don't have to like work for the answers as much anymore. And I think that removes a lot of our own intuition, a lot of our own feelings about the decisions that we're making. Um, and like we're not really sourcing our own information. We're just like pressing a button and getting it immediately and being like, okay, great, that. And I'm not like, I think there are many great things about that. But I do think so much of the way we exist removes us from ourselves. It's very, very outward facing. Um, and I think, at least for me, like that's a lot of what I try to do is like slow down and listen. My best friend has this thing that she says that I love or like if someone's having trouble making a decision, like, what do you say when you can't make a decision? You say, yeah, I don't know. Like, what do you want? I don't know. She always says, but if you did know, which I think is so great because for the most part, we do. It's just that I don't know. I don't know if it's like laziness or fear or what it is. But I think we've all become very, very afraid of making the wrong choice. I think there's like something, I mean, I notice it so much in my industry. It's like no one wants to be the one that just like makes a choice. Everything's sort of done by committee. I feel like if people just ask themselves, like, but if I did know, and I'm going to trust whatever that answer is, and I'm going to deal with the repercussions, I think that would inevitably slow things down a little. And I think people would start to react and exist in the world in a more intentional way. At least I hope they would. I don't know.
All right. I think we've solved the
Great.
problem
We
of
fixed
humanity.
humanity. We
Great.
fixed it.
Good job, Zosia. All in an hour.
And we fixed humanity. Like, who do we call to tell them? Who should we call? Just be like, we did.
I mean, people just have to tune in to the podcast,
Great.
I guess.
They'll just know. They'll just know. God, what a productive hour that was.
Yeah, thank you, Zosia. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Say hi to your horses for me.
Thank you.
I hope we cross paths again, either directly or indirectly.
Hopefully it's like on another crazy sci-fi. We're like in the woods somewhere. Maybe with coyotes and bugs.
You know what? There's something to that. Also, yes. All right, let's do it. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I stop recording?
I don't think so. This was a pleasure.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Great. Of course. Yeah.